Welcome to Mysteries, Monsters, and Mayhem.
I'm Shannon Lawrence.
And I'm MB Partlow.
Quick content warning before we get started. This podcast may contain language and disturbing content, so enter at your own risk. I didn't push it hard enough.
Hello.
Hi.
I think we should just start everyone with laughter.
I pushed the thing to go. I was like, and we're no.
Yeah, and away we go. No, not yet.
It's not going. Okay. So, how's it going?
Good. I have a slightly amusing story.
Oh, good.
It amuses me. So, one day, Joe and I went out and picked up dinner from a food truck. And we stopped at Cheers to pick up some beer. And I don't know what happened in Cheers on this particular day because everybody was fucking chatty. I mean, people were, the help that worked there, they were like, can I help you find anything? Like, everybody asked us that. So this young guy comes up to us by the beer. First of all, here's the first thing that happens. And he goes, can I help you find something? And Joe has already gotten what he wanted. And I looked at the guy and I said, oh, no, thank you. I said, I don't really know what I want yet. Trying to figure that out. And he goes, well, what kind of beer do you like? Do you like an IPA? And I said, no, I do not like an IPA. And I don't want a porter or a stout. So there we go. He goes, well, what do you like? And I said, well, I like, because I happened to be standing in front of it and I saw it and I said, oh, well, I do like Scottish ale. And he's like, oh, you know what? There's this Scottish ale. If you really like Scottish ale, it's called Laughing Lab. And I looked at him and I was like, dude, no fucking shit.
I live here in Colorado.
I didn't say that, but I looked at him and I went, well, duh. I did say duh, but I didn't say no fucking shit.
Isn't that the Colorado brewery that Laughing Lab's from? Because I like Laughing Lab fine, you know?
Yeah, it's like... right. Yeah, Bristol Brewing.
That's right. Okay.
So I looked at him and I said, that would be my favorite beer, but I would rather have it on tap than out of a bottle. Thank you very much. Oh, well, yes. So I pick out some beer. We go. We get in line. And then the cashier is chatty as heck. And he and Joe are having guy chat. You know how, and you're just standing there like, why am I here? So the guy goes, are you having a good day? And Joe gives the standard, well, yeah, it's not too bad. It's better now. Work's over, blah, blah, blah. And I say, I can't contain myself any longer. So I said, are you kidding? It's a fucking fantastic day. I got a Lazy Boy recliner for $39. I did. I went to a thrift store and got a new Lazy Boy recliner. And it's a slimmer one. It's not like a giant.
Yeah.
And you have to push back to recline it. Fucking immaculate. I'm so excited about this. And Joe was just laughing. And I put my hand on his arm and I said, I didn't tell you what else I got. And they're both laughing at this point. I said, I got pink glitter Converse. Joe was notably less excited about the sneakers. I was thrilled to death. And the guy goes, yeah, you probably would have liked the glitter beer. And I was like, shut the front door. What are you talking about? He goes, yeah, we had glitter beer. I said, who makes it? What kind of beer is it? He goes, well, let me see if we still have any. So he walks over and I follow him. They still had some.
Oh.
But
was it an IPA?
No, it was a sour. I'd almost rather drink an IPA than a sour.
No.
So I was like, damn. But I was like, yeah, it was just a better fucking day for me. And I felt the need to announce it. I've been looking for a chair for my living room because we had a big blue chair.
Yeah.
Oh, it's busted. It's got worn holes in it. And
we were going to, so my daughter moved out of her old room and then she needed a bed because she moved to a smaller room. And then we took her old bed and we took it to the cabin with us.
Nice.
So we didn't have a guest bed anymore. Or no, I'm sorry. So the guest bed I was going to have her sleep in, and that she did very briefly after we got rid of her old bunk bed. Yeah, so we took that up there. So anyway, no guest bed. And then we were going to move our futon up into her old room, which is where we're going to be recording here eventually, and maybe not in the too distant future now, because I've actually gotten people to do their shit. And and so we were going to get her an easy chair because we got like 3 recliners downstairs. Yeah. And then she likes to just lie on the futon and because we do movie night down there, we have a movie screen and a projector and all that stuff. So we were going to have to get one, and then we could have gotten her a little one. And then now I'm like, well, if we bring the bed back down, because now we have a king size bed up at the cabin.
Ooh.
Yeah, I was all over the place with that. But anyway, my brain is very scattered right now. But yeah, so we got a king size bed. So now we don't need that bed up there anymore. And there's no room for it. And we have the bunk bed up there already for the others. So we have 3 beds in this little cabin.
Wait, where's the third bed?
Bunk bed, 1, 2.
Oh, okay.
Yeah,
I thought you were saying you had the bunk bed
3
and
sleeping
2 other
surfaces.
Because I slept on the bottom of that bunk bed. It was quite comfortable.
Yeah, it's not bad. And we got that king is very nice because neither of us could sleep in the small, even though that's the bed that we slept in when we got married because it's my childhood bed. Well, from like age 10 up, it was my bed. Because before that, I just had a bunk bed with my brother and we would get 2-bedroom apartments.
Right.
So, anyway, we can't do it anymore. We slept on that bed together for years, and now we're like, first of all, we're both bigger than we were.
Wow.
That right there is part of it.
Aren't we all?
We were bean poles when we were sharing that bed before. There's plenty of room. And I just didn't sleep then. Right? I had the terrible insomnia.
You sleep so much now.
But I know, right? But I do sleep some now. Like, I can actually sleep now. But it's funny because now that I can sleep some, I need more sleep. Like, it's always, I need more sleep, and it's harder to function with some sleep than with no sleep. But anyway, so it's a bit, round and round we go. But we had the king bed last time we were up there. And so that was so nice. It was like we weren't right on top of each other, and he didn't, because like in the little bed, he would move and I would fall into the hole, right? Like I would fall toward him. It was ridiculous. Like a comedy of errors about newlyweds, but we've been married 26 years next month.
Wow.
Yeah.
Congratulations, because I'll forget about it next month.
That's fine. We might go to Taos or something very small for nice. It. But that's because our Mexico trip is kind of ultimately meant to be like our 25 year that we didn't get to do last year because there was a pandemic when we hit our 25 year.
Yeah, we're going to go, knock wood, we're going to Hawaii next year for our 30th.
Nice.
So this year, I think we went out to dinner. I was like...
Yeah, I don't even think we went out to dinner this year. Like, it was weird. But the first year of the pandemic we did, while everybody online was bitching about anybody who went out, we went out and ate on the patio.
Right.
During the pandemic, I was like, y'all can criticize all you want. I'm tired of being trapped in my house and I'm eating at a restaurant. Mm-hmm. Also, they need to survive if you want restaurants later. So,
yes.
But, yeah. I don't know what we're doing with the freaking bed. But I guess we're going to have a full guest bed in the room when we're recording, which probably works because you need because that's just more soft buffer as long as there's blankets and shit on it, right?
So I can nap while we're...
That's right. We'll just sit on the bed to record.
Oh my God. Yeah, we'd get that would be a good recording.
I would just be talking and then you hear him be like, snore.
Let's be honest, snoring. But wait, I also talk in my sleep. I can't be any less coherent when I'm asleep.
I don't know if I talk in my sleep. Not a lot. I did when I was a teenager. But Jeff sleeps so hard, nobody would know if I talk in my sleep. So it doesn't matter. We went looking at kayaks yesterday at this little shop that's on like Cimarron / Highway 24, and it's by the Roundhouse Brewing or whatever that's called. It's right there, and you pass by, and there's just a bunch of kayaks, and we never paid that much attention, but there's colorful kayaks up front, and we're like, well, let's go check it out, because I've been looking at used ones online. And, yeah, it just made me think of it when you were at the liquor store, and the guy was like, do you need any help? And he was all chipper. We walk in, and, like, here's a person over here that calls hi to us, and then we go over here, and somebody else calls hi to us, and they're all wearing normal clothes. So, first of all, I was like, are you just a stranger talking to me, or are you a person who works here? They're very friendly there, is what I'm saying. But I never knew who was talking to me, because then somebody'd say something like, oh, what do you think of that one? And then I'm like, I look over and there's a normally dressed man standing there. I'm like, did you just talk to me?
Did they not have like name tags on it?
No.
Okay, because I really do feel like there needs to be some...
There needs to be a delineation, especially because there were like 10 people working. And there were 2 people visiting the store.
Yes, at the shop we have name tags.
Yeah, something.
The shop where I work don't work.
Like,
but yeah, that's how people know you work there.
Anyway, I was fascinated because they have like one brand there and it's Hobie. And so like, I didn't know you could get kayaks that have pedal things and they have fins. Yes. So, yes. And once I saw that, I was like, well, fuck, now I need one with pedals because then you can go back and forth between your legs and your arms if you want to. Because you still get a paddle, but you can pedal your feet. And it has little fins underneath that are like side by side. I'm doing it, and you guys can't see it, like side by side, and they flap.
I can.
It's like a doggy paddle underneath your.
Oh my God!
Yes. And then we looked, and they had a giant 4-seater one. It's massive. It's a big flat, like blow up one, and it has actual chairs sitting on it that are like mounted.
Okay, I don't think that's a kayak anymore.
And apparently it is. But Jeff was like, oh, and how many pedals does that come with? And the guy's like, 1, because it has the pedals. And I'm like, okay, first of all, because we're looking, and like, yeah, everything comes with 1, even the 2-seater and stuff, because they think everybody's going to use the pedals. And I'm like, okay, but what if we want to do both?
Yeah.
Like, I want to take a kayak and I want to be buff as fuck afterwards. Okay? Not just my legs, my arms, but it's really good because I know my arms are going to get tired first. My legs, they can go on for days, you know, but my arms are going to be like, what have you done to me? But yeah, like seriously, every time we went into a different room, hi, how are you doing today? And I'm like, fuck, this is way too many people and I did not come out to talk to people. And then I remembered that the shirt I had put on that day, not intending to go out in public, it was kind of a whim thing. I went, let's go to the Sourdough Boulangerie. And he was like, it closes in 40 minutes and it's 30 minutes away. And I was like, let's go now. I was wearing my shirt that says it's not going to lick itself. While having all these cheerful, attentive people. Yes. So I'm like walking with my arms crossed. And then I was like, fuck it.
I got my new nasty t-shirts, so I'm going to wear those.
That's good.
For the next few days. They're not all nasty. 2 are pride t-shirts.
Okay.
But one says, what the heck does it say? I'm trying to remember how it's phrased. It says, Mom by choice, for choice.
Okay. I just got one that said Mama Bear to wear to the...
I got the Mama Bear. If your parents don't support you, you're my kid now.
Mine just says Mama Bear. And it has like, there's a big bear. And then there's a little baby bear who's rainbows.
Yes. Mine has the bear, but it has the whole, if your parents don't support you, you're my child now.
Right? I'm your mom now.
I'm your mom now. Bring me a beer. I love you. Bring me a beer.
Yeah. So there were so many fun shirts when I was trying to find Savannah something, but she already had an outfit planned. So then after I got all these t-shirts, I was like, do you like any of these? She's like, not really. I know what I want to wear already. And I was like, I just wasted so much
Target had some good Pride stuff this year.
Oh, wait, we didn't. Like the first time we took her, you guys met us. Mm-hmm. So we went to like the party store and we got everything rainbowing. This time she had her own stuff that she wanted to do. So we didn't really do that. So I just had my shirt. But I was looking at all these fun ones for adults that I'm like, I'm going to get this for her when she's older. It would be very inappropriate now. Everybody was dressed up. Well, I mean, we are not dressed up compared to anybody else at Pride, that is for sure. There is some flamboyant happenings there. But again, we kind of did that the first time.
Yeah. And there are some people who aren't wearing much at all. All right. Who's starting this?
I'm starting.
You're starting. Oh, that's right.
Yeah.
You've got the uplifting stuff.
I do. Okay, so I will give you guys a warning. And because there's letters I'm going to read from the person, there are going to be some details. And this one's a nasty one. You're probably not going to recognize when I say I'm talking about the Werewolf of Wysteria, but some of you will. I think 2 will know exactly what I'm talking about, also known as the Gray Man and a few other things, but those were the 2 actual main press ones. And you'll know who I'm talking about here eventually. But yes, there is some nasty stuff. So this is your trigger warning. These are crimes against children. Hamilton Fish was born May 19th, 1870 in Washington, D.C., the youngest of 4 siblings. His dad was originally a riverboat captain, and then he had gone on to do like manufacturing fertilizer, I think was it. But the riverboat captain was the most interesting to me. He was 75 years old when Hamilton was born.
Wow.
43 years older than Hamilton's mom. So Hamilton's dad died in 1875 of a heart attack because he was fucking... he was 80 years old at that point.
Because he was fucking younger women.
That's right. So his mother put him into St. John's orphanage because she couldn't care for him. I'm assuming then that all of his other siblings went there too. Where he was mocked. They called him Ham and Eggs because his name was Hamilton. And this really bothered him. Like, really bothered. I was like, really? That's the worst they called you?
I'm like, yeah.
I had a name that they couldn't make fun of in school. It drove people nuts because the worst they could come up with was Shannon the Cannon at the time. And I was like, and? They'd use it and I was like, okay. Sounds good to me. But anyway, he was whipped there. It's St. John's. It was...
yeah.
Can we all picture the Catholic orphanage and what we've seen has now that has happened at those? Even if you were white, terrible things happened to you. If you weren't white, it was worse. And you were dead and buried outside the schools. Anyway, 2 things came out of this time there. One, he changed his name to Albert, so they couldn't call him Ham and Eggs anymore. Albert was the name of a dead sibling. There wasn't more details on that, so it sounded like as young as they were, died in childbirth or died very young, probably. 2, he learned he liked physical pain. In fact, when he would be given beatings, he got erections. So, and of course, that just gave kids something else to tease him about. Yeah, so, and here's the thing. He was like 5 years old when he was put in that orphanage. 4 years later, in 1879, his mom got a job for the government, so she was actually able to bring the kids home. When he was 12, he was in a relationship with another boy who taught him coprophagia, that is eating feces, and urophilia, drinking urine. In 1890, Albert went to New York City where he became a prostitute, but also claims to have started raping young boys who were orphans or lured from their homes. He brought his mom there to live with him. There's no indication ever that she knew anything about what he was doing. He would go out and do it. And that shows in his later crimes is that he always found like an abandoned house here or something like that. So I assume that he was doing the same with the boys. But it's New York City. There's alleys. There's,
Yeah.
But his mom, there's nothing about her after this. We don't even know when she dies.
Wow.
She's just, whoop. So she didn't know anything about it. In 1898, when he was 28, his mother arranged a marriage to a 19-year-old woman for him. And that was still common then, my friend from church. Though they would have 6 children together. Yeah, so there was...
You can't see the look on my face.
Happening.
I just shot.
Fish continued seeking male company and raping young boys, usually younger than 6 years old, throughout their marriage. He was a house painter during this time, and he managed to find time to go to brothels to be whipped still, in addition to the ongoing rapes and relationships with male lovers. One such lover was mentally disabled. Fish tied him up and attempted to castrate him at one point, because he'd gone to a museum and they had like a model of the inside of a penis or something like that. And for some reason, he got obsessed with castration. I was like, that is not what that model is about. So he tried to castrate him and he ended up letting him go without finishing. One thing said he escaped, but then I found that Fish, when they interviewed him about it, he was like, yeah, I let him go. That was the last I ever saw him or whatever. So Fish would later confess that he preferred the mentally disabled and black children at this point because they wouldn't be missed and no one would pay much attention to them if they were hurt. And the fact that the rapes that he was probably conducting weren't documented really backs him up, doesn't it? In 1903, he was caught embezzling and sentenced to Sing Sing. This would not be the last time he was caught for a petty crime, but he usually got off without punishment. He was repeatedly brought in for sending lewd letters to women who had placed Lonely Hearts ads, looking for pen pals and stuff.
Where did he find the time?
He got shit done, man.
I'm like, because he's obviously having relations with his wife, and he has 6 children, and he has a job, and he's attacking young boys, and he has male lovers, and he's going to brothels to be whipped.
What? Because he wouldn't have asked his wife at that time to whip him.
But he still has time to... write rude letters too. Oh
right?
my God.
Because they were, I guess women would ask for pen pals and then they would write. And then, yeah, he'd send them letters. And then some of them were pretty extreme. Like one, he was writing back and forth with this woman and she had a husband and child, which I found interesting. But
God, it was Tinder.
right? It really was though. And he was like, hey, we should tie up your husband and your child. Like he wrote a letter to her about this and she did. I think she turned it into the police. And then like he later was like, I don't know why none of them would take any of my suggestions. Because then he'd write to him and then eventually he'd say, I would really like you to beat me. I really like it. I like to be whipped, you know, and then they'd stop writing to him. And he's like, well, why'd they stop writing to me? But at this point, see, I'm not kink shaming. Because there are plenty of people who like this.
Yeah.
And so I have nothing, just want to be very clear. I am not kink shaming that. The only thing about him I kink shame is murder and rape. Okay?
Yeah.
And castration of lovers that were willingly doing it. That lover was a teenage boy at that time, but I think he was older, old enough not to be castrated though. So and I think it was that woman who he said, let's tie up your husband and child so that we can eat them, is what he told her. I think she might be the one who turned him in. Either way, he was turned in and they sent him to Bellevue, the psychiatric hospital.
Yeah.
And he also was in and out of there a lot. I'll probably say that again, or I've already said it. But he went in and out of psychiatric facilities as well, because he would get caught for this shit and then he'd get out and he'd keep doing it. We have proven at this point, even though the courts don't seem to agree, that sexual predators will always be sexual predators.
Mm-hmm.
In 1917, his wife left him for a handyman. I was a little surprised considering the time that she was like, fuck you, I'm gone. Not only that, she didn't take the kids. She left him for a handyman and she left all 6 kids. So he was left to raise them. The youngest was 3 years old when she left.
Oh my God.
He would take I can't imagine what it must have been like to be married to him.
No.
First of all, he was never home. Right? He couldn't have been. He would take 2 or 3 more wives, but they were very brief. And that was by his admission. But some things said 2, some said 3. One wife lasts a week. And then that was done. But his wife hadn't actually divorced him. She just left. So none of the other marriages were actually valid. For the most part, he parented solo, and his children would later state that he never laid a hand on them and said grace at every meal. His stepchildren, kids of at least one of the wives, did tell of a game he played with them where he would wear a pair of brown underwear. He'd go put the same pair of underwear on each time. He would get on all fours, and he would have one of the kids sit on his back at a time, and they were to be facing the opposite way of him. So facing the rear, right, basically, and they would hold up a certain number of fingers, and he had to guess. And if he was wrong, they had to paddle him. He had a paint stirrer that he would have them use, or a paintbrush, and they had to spank him. So he wasn't, somehow he knew, I just want to point this out because there's going to be an insanity plea involved later, that he knew better than to touch his stepchildren this way. Right? So that he did get sexual pleasure, but he did not inappropriately touch them, and he didn't have them inappropriately touch him in as much as, that was because it was sexual for him. Right. But he wasn't doing the things that happen with molestation a lot, we'll say. So, yes. But he still got his jollies off his stepchildren. Still definitely not okay.
I'm still stuck on the whole brown underwear.
I know, because she said,
that's such
it was like on the stand, she said something about brown trunks. He went and put on these brown trunks each time. So, I don't know what that's about.
They were swimming trunks.
That's what I thought, but then everything else said underwear, so that could be that they didn't think of swimming trunks. But, yeah, I just don't know. I mean, why either way? But, anyway, yeah, his kids said he was good to him, though. So this was the worst that any of the kids had to say about him. And actually, they seem to have grown up to be successful, young people. Because, eventually, one of his sons was sending money back to him, and they listed where he worked. It was good stuff. So whatever else he did, he seems to have produced his good humans.
Yes, he must have had a highly compartmentalized mind.
Yes.
So that he could go and do these things
and then
on the one hand and
not do it to his kids.
Or reveal it to his wife.
Yeah. Yeah. Because there's a lot of that where you talk to the wives in the past when you're looking at the true crime and they're like,
Yes.
well, he did have these weird requests of me and stuff like that. But they also tend to be very prudish about the stuff they turn down if you think about it. Like, so he wanted you to paddle him. He's your husband, do it. If he gets a boner from it, then great. But anyway, moving on. Albert Fish's family had a history of mental illness. In addition to his sexual misadventures, he started hearing voices around his kind of, I think, middle age. He started hearing voices. His mother had also heard voices and had hallucinations, and an uncle had what they referred to as religious psychosis, for which he was in a state institution.
Oh, my God.
Several of his siblings suffered some sort of mental disabilities, and there were further reports of other relatives being mentally unwell. So it really ran in the family. Fish himself would spend plenty of time in the institutions, like I already said. May 25th, 1928, an 18-year-old man named Edward Budd put an ad in the New York World looking for a work position in the country. He and his parents lived in a very small, like, 2-bedroom, even though it was a big family, place because they didn't have money. So he had decided, I'm going to go and I'm going to work in the country where there's open air and there's space. In that ad, he lists his address, which used to be pretty common, which freaks me out. Intrigued by the possibilities of this young man, Fish responded to the ad, saying his name was Frank Howard, that he was a farmer, that he was retired from doing, I don't know, stuff in the city. He made himself out to be this big guy from the city who had decided to be a farmer, and that he was interested in hiring Edward. He offered him $15 per week, which was a good amount of money, but said he had an appointment and would have to come back to further discuss the hiring details. While there, he set his eyes on Edward's younger sister, 10-year-old Grace Budd. She came in, everybody, like, a couple articles went into she was a very beautiful child. And when he was there, it was a Sunday, and she was in her Sunday best, and she was dressed up and all of that stuff. So when Fish returned a second time after having sent, so he's like, I'll come back in a week on this day or whatever. He doesn't show up, but he sends a telegram. And he apologizes for not showing up that day. And he does then come next day or 2 days later. And he brought a bunch of gifts, and including food. One of them was pot cheese, they kept calling it. And then fresh strawberries that he said were from his farm. He waved around a bunch of money. He had Grace count the money. Grace sat on his lap at one point to go, because he just pulled out this wad, he was showing them, I'm good for it, right? And the family fed him lunch, and then he left, but he left with Grace. He was supposedly taking her to a birthday party for his niece in New York City. And the Budd family being poor, Mr. Budd had convinced his wife, who at first was like, no, thank you for the offer, but no. And his wife was like, you know what? She never gets to do anything special like this. This is going to be a ritzy birthday party. This is going to be something she can go do fun stuff and have neat foods and all this stuff. And so the wife said, okay. Because here's a good time to tell you guys that everybody who met him, he seemed very meek, polite, mild. They thought he was a fragile old man. He was kind of stooped over. He seemed fragile. And even later officials would describe him the same way. But of course, Grace never came back home from the party. That didn't exist. The Budds sent Edward to the police the next day when she hadn't come home by dinner, and they were able to track down the Western Union where the mysterious Frank had sent the telegram from. They also found a food cart where Frank had purchased the strawberries and the pot cheese he'd brought, saying it was from his farm. That was as far as they got, though, because it was a fake name, fake address. And at that time, it's not like we had social media and pictures of everybody and all that good stuff. So he was in the wind. Then in 1934, the original detective on the case, it was, Mr. King, Detective King. He had stayed on this investigation, even though the investigation was kind of officially done and over with after a certain period of time. He had a journalist friend named Walter Winchell, and he would plant seeds with him and tell him stuff about the case so that so at this point, it's however many years later, 4, 5, 6 years later, he goes to this journalist friend and he's like, I've got a break in the case. And he didn't. But he was hoping to shake something loose. Right. And so he kind of told him this stuff, and Winchell turned around and he wrote for the New York Daily Mirror. And so he put it out in the Mirror. And sure enough, guess who was a reader of the New York Daily Mirror? Fish. So the Budds received a letter. This was his way of responding to it because they had said that they had. So they put in the article, and it wasn't clear because the newspaper man kind of blew things up even further, and the one guy had said some stuff. But basically, they said they had a break because there was an addict, like a homeless addict, who had seen some things and had evidence, is what he put in the article, so that people would think there was a witness who was working with them. So anyway, he sends this letter to the Budds. And Mrs. Budd was illiterate, so Edward read it, the oldest child. The beginning of the letter stated, it was a long letter, so at first I was going to read it, and I was like, good Lord, no. I'm going to read portions of it, though, because it's terrible, and he liked to send letters to victim parents. Anyway, the beginning of the letter stated that a friend of the writer, named Captain John Davis, had been stuck in China after his boat got stolen, and in China there was a meat shortage. And so children under age 14 were being stolen off the streets and cut up by butchers to be served as meat. I meant to look that up to see if there was a meat shortage at all. Is that where the dog jokes come from? Where they eat dogs?
Right.
I don't know. I meant to look that up. But the letter read in part. A boy or girl's behind, which is the sweetest part of the body and sold as a veal cutlet, brought the highest price. John stayed there so long he acquired a taste for human flesh. He said that John had returned to New York and kidnapped 2 boys who he beat to tenderize the meat, then killed and ate. He continued, he told me so often how good human flesh was I made up my mind to taste it. The letter writer recounted how he'd visited them and brought them pot cheese and strawberries to make sure they knew that this was really him, and that they'd fed him lunch. Then, quote, Grace sat in my lap and kissed me. I made up my mind to eat her. On the pretense of taking her to a party. You said yes, she could go. I took her to an empty house in Westchester I'd already picked out. When we got there, I told her to remain outside. She picked wildflowers. I went upstairs and stripped all my clothes off. I knew if I did not, I would get her blood on them. Just remember, this is a letter to her parents. When all was ready, I went to the window and called her. Then I hid in a closet until she was in the room. When she saw me all naked, she began to cry and tried to run down the stairs. I grabbed her and she said she would tell her mama. First, I stripped her naked. How she did kick, bite, and scratch. I choked her to death, then cut her in small pieces so I could take my meat to my rooms, cook and eat it. How sweet and tender her little ass was, roasted in the oven. It took me 9 days to eat her entire body. I did not fuck her, though. I could have had I wished. She died a virgin.
That's horrifying.
It's absolutely. And again, there was a lot more detail in that beginning part that I cut out of what he was saying in China. And I think back and I'm like, well, he didn't actually have this friend, and that's never actually come up as anything.
Right.
So I just think it's whatever racism that dog thing was born of, where they're like, there's dogs in the Chinese
Now,
food.
did we talk about on the podcast the guy who ate his own foot?
Yeah, you did.
Okay.
On our cannibalism one.
I couldn't remember if I had talked about that or not. And I'm like, if you need to taste human flesh, that's the way to do it.
Or buy one from,
And he invited his friends over, so.
That's so weird.
Okay.
It's not known whether that last sentence is true, whether she did die a virgin. He sometimes said he raped her, other times said he didn't. He lied compulsively, though, throughout his time with officials, and at one point claimed over 400 victims. So, though it's thought he was talking about rape victims, so that number could very well be very high, not murder victims. Right. But he did say, I have a murder victim for every state I've ever lived in. And police were able to confirm he'd lived in 23 states at least.
Ugh.
The Budds took the letter to the police, of course, who were able to trace the stationery and envelope by an emblem for the New York Private Chauffeurs Benevolent Association. Police went to the NYPCBA, because I wasn't going to say that over and over, and they interviewed men there. They looked at handwriting samples and stuff because they had his telegram, and they ultimately discovered a janitor who admitted he had stolen some of the stationery. He'd taken home a couple sheets of stationery and envelopes to use, but he'd left it behind in his rooming house when he moved out, so it had been left in that room. So on to the boarding house they went, where the landlady gave them the name of the next tenant who had moved into that room, Albert H. Fish, using his real name for everything else, right? Luckily, Fish had just checked out, but a check from his son had been mailed before he could make other arrangements, and he'd asked her to hold it for him. And this is the son that was sending him money to live by. All police had to do was wait for Fish to show up for his check. And there, William F. King, that detective, arrested Fish, who attacked the officer with a razor, but was overpowered quickly. He basically just had to bend his wrist, because it's one thing to be stronger than children.
Yes.
Yeah. It's another to be stronger than
an enraged adult male.
Yes. Not only did he end up admitting to killing Grace, he never denied it from when they picked him up, but he said he'd originally gone there to kill her brother, of course, intending to castrate him. In fact, the first time he'd left their home, he was still planning on killing the brother and had offered to hire a brother's friend so that both boys he would have.
Oh, God.
And had convinced himself he could overpower these hardy 18-year-old boys. That would have done his undoing.
Yeah.
He would know, had he actually taken those boys, there would have been one fewer victim. But he did not. So he was still planning on him. So he had gone out. He'd bought a knife, a cleaver, and a saw. And then he'd wrapped them in cloth and he'd hidden them near the home before he went into the home. But he was just so taken with Gracie, he took her instead. When he left with her, he retrieved his bundle, almost leaving it on the train. He had that cloth bundle. And then Grace was like, oh, you're forgetting your stuff. And so he grabbed it. And, yep. He told police where to find her body after having given them the details of her death, and they were able to retrieve some of her remains from behind a small place called Wysteria Cottage, which is how he came to be known as the Werewolf of Wysteria. After his arrest for Grace's killing, the mother of an 8-year-old boy named Bill Gaffney visited Fish in prison. Her son had disappeared February 11th, 1927, while playing with a 3-year-old neighbor named Billy Beaton. There were a lot of Billies. Billy Beaton had been found on the roof of a nearby apartment and had said the boogeyman had taken his friend, Billy Gaffney. He described him as old, with gray hair and a gray mustache. Though there were other suspects, a trolley worker had identified Fish from a photo as having had a young boy on the trolley, and the boy was crying and asking for his mom, and Fish had kept a grip on him the whole time. He had to drag him on. He had to drag him off.
Right.
The little guy was fighting him. But, everybody saw it, but they just thought it was parent or whatever, I assume. Fish graphically admitted to killing Billy Gaffney and eating him, saying he kidnapped him, stripped him, and burned his clothes. He always had that detail, because I cut that out of the last letter, but he always gave that, and then I burned their clothes. Before he would finish them, before he would, he would strip them and burn their clothes. But then he bound and gagged him with a filthy rag he'd found in a nearby dumpster. Then he'd gone home that night, left this little boy bound and gagged in the dark.
Oh,
near this, yep. And he'd return the next day at about, I think he said 2 p.m., with a bag of tools that included a cat o' nine tails he'd made from a leather belt he'd cut into strips. He said, quote, I whipped his bare behind till the blood ran from his legs. I cut off his ears, nose, slit his mouth from ear to ear, gouged out his eyes. He was dead then. I stuck the knife in his belly and held my mouth to his body and drank his blood, end quote. He cut him up, threw the remains he couldn't eat into bodies of water nearby. He called them like slimy puddles I dropped them in that are all along this road, he had told the cops. And, quote, I came home with my meat. I had the front of his body I liked best. His monkey and peewees, yes, those are the terms he used, and a nice little fat behind to roast in the oven and eat. I made a stew out of his ears, nose, pieces of his face and belly. I put onions, carrots, turnips, celery, salt, and pepper. It was good. Then I split the cheeks of his behind open, cut off his monkey and peewees, and washed them first. I put strips of bacon on each cheek of his behind and put them in the oven. Then I picked 4 onions, and when the meat had roasted about a quarter hour, I poured about a pint of water over it for gravy and put in the onions. At frequent intervals, I basted his behind with a wooden spoon so the meat would be nice and juicy. In about 2 hours, it was nice and brown, cooked through. I never ate any roast turkey that tasted half as good as his sweet, fat little behind. He was very obsessed with the behinds.
Yeah.
I ate every bit of the meat in about 4 days. His little monkey was as sweet as a nut, but his peewees I could not chew, threw them in the toilet. End quote. This was for the mom. Again, just a reminder to people.
His monkey.
Monkey and peewees. That's right. That's a very childlike
term.
Yes.
And it's not one I've ever heard before.
So it made me wonder if, even though he never said it, he was perhaps molested in the orphanage.
It's possible.
Or he just learned those terms from other kids. Either way. Fish's trial for Grace's murder started March 11th, 1935. His attorney claimed he was insane and that God had told him to kill and eat kids. Dempsey, his attorney, felt he might have lead colic, which was something that house painters got at the time because there was lead in the paint.
Yes.
Like a Mad Hatter, right? Psychiatrists disagreed on whether he was insane, especially considering his sexual predilections. He admitted to pouring alcohol on cotton, putting it into his anus, and lighting it on fire. He also said
his own anus?
Yes, but it did say in a couple articles that this was something he had done to children as well. But I couldn't find that confirmed, you know? He also said he stuck pins in his body between his scrotum and anus, which the psychiatrist thought he was lying about, until they did x-rays. And at least 29 needles were found in his pelvic region, having been stuck through his peritoneum, just as he'd said. So he said at first it was just sticking them in, taking them out, sticking them in, taking them out. Then he started pushing them in so far he couldn't get them out. So
I'm going to throw up now.
Yeah. Again, I'm not going to kink shame. So, but it couldn't have felt good to sit down. That's for sure. He spoke of having religious visions and bloodlust. His children said he'd self-flagellated with a nail-studded paddle and stuck needles under his fingernails in front of them.
Oh.
Fish stated that God would have stopped him if he had been in the wrong for killing children, just as God had stopped Abraham from killing his son. And while he repeatedly said he was indifferent about whether he lived or died, he was like, it doesn't matter. He was very, very just squashed once police got him. He also said he thought God still had plans for him, though. They always still think God still has plans for them, I've noticed. It ended up being split 4-3 between the psychiatrists and alienists that they'd called in. It was ultimately decided that he was sane. That's 4, the 4 to the 3, though his main psychiatrist vehemently disagreed. And Fish was found guilty by a jury after an hour's deliberation and sentenced to death, for which he thanked the judge. He was intrigued at the prospect of the electric chair. And jurors later would say they did think that he was insane, but not so insane he didn't know
right from wrong.
What he was doing was wrong. And they also they admitted, that they just wanted him off the streets, basically. Yeah. So they were like, doesn't matter if he's insane. At this point, he confessed to one more murder, saying he had killed an 8-year-old boy named Francis X. McDonnell on July 15th, 1924. The boy had been playing with a group of kids when he disappeared. Witnesses had seen what they described as an old gray-haired tramp, later referred to as the Gray Man, thus that other second nickname, watching him and walking into the woods with him. His father, a police officer, organized a search when Francis didn't come home for dinner. They found him in the woods nearby, naked, horrifically beaten and strangled with his own suspenders. They felt the old man they'd seen might have had an associate because the beating was so severe they thought he looked too weak to have done it again. Albert Fish was only 5'5" and weighed about 130 pounds. But I'm sorry, that doesn't mean you don't have a wiry strength. That doesn't...
Yeah.
He had a stooped back again. He mumbled to himself, like they had watched him walking and mumbling and clenching and unclenching his hands. So at this point, I think his mental illness was really getting away with him. Mm-hmm. He was also felt to be responsible for the murder of a 16-year-old girl named Mary Ellen O'Connor in 1932, which she seemed so out of his normal victimology to me.
Right.
But the conditions in which she was found made sense. Her body was badly beaten again, found in the woods near a house Fish had been painting. So, Dr. Wortham, his main psychiatrist, felt confident that Fish had killed at least 15 children and mutilated at least 100. So the kids he was raping, apparently he was also mutilating in some way, shape, or form. Albert Fish was executed January 16th, 1936 in the Sing Sing electric chair for the death of Grace Budd. That's the only crime he was ever convicted of. So, there you go. The detective who originally arrested him, King, thought he might have also been the attacker called the Brooklyn Vampire. The vampire beat, raped, and strangled at least 2 victims, Yetta Abramovitz, who was 12 in 1927, and Benjamin Collings in 1932, who was 17. Witness descriptions in Yetta's case had described, though, a tall young man who was routinely trying to lure girls away in the neighborhood. And so there's not much information about whether he committed these crimes. Of course, the detective would know a lot more than I would about that. But again, those did seem outside his victimology. But he was also sleeping with older teenage men and boys. But he only, as far as we know, really attacked one of them. But there might have been more. He might have attacked his lovers as well. So I don't know.
Wow.
So, my sources, Murderpedia, Biography of Albert Fish, Serial Killer by Charles Montaldo on ThoughtCo, Ranker, and All That's Interesting.
I'm like, that's just...
Yeah, he was pretty foul.
Yeah.
I hadn't done a foul one in a while.
You had not. You were due. Ish. I don't know. I
thought it was... Oh, what?
I was going to say, I could have gone on without that one.
Right. They kept saying, like, he was homosexual. And I'm like, but was he? Or was he bi? Or did he just not care? Was he pan? Was it all around? Like, it seems like if somebody was ever had like one experience with the same sex, people are like, okay, then they are gay. But
right.
But he did clearly, I feel he clearly preferred the males.
Yes.
But he also, how was he so taken with, Grace and
he saw out. Well, did it say?
So it didn't say whether they were men or women, but as far as I know, brothels tended to be women at that time. I don't know that. I don't know enough about brothels to know if perhaps they kept around a guy or if they would have seen that as wrong and not done it.
I don't know. If anyone knows,
sure.
Let us. If anyone knows the history of brothels, we would love to hear about it. So this is sort of a rabbit hole I fell into because Thing 2 gave me a lead on a story. And the headline, and I'm not going to talk about this story, so I'm just going to give you the bullet points. The headline was that this guy confessed to killing his stepsister in order to get her body exhumed so that
oh yes,
the DNA could be tested because he thought his father, her stepfather, was the guilty party. So I read up on that, and when I read the headline, I was like, oh, hell yeah, that sounds like a great story. It happened in the Netherlands. Oh. And when I was reading it, he did do that, and they did exhume the body. But the DNA sample they found in semen was DNA for 3 different people.
Oh.
So they did have one... There was one person who they decided it was him, and he has been convicted of the crime. And the prosecuting attorney said there's no way it could have been a consensual relationship because she did not have time. And I was like, how much fucking time does it? I didn't understand that. So to me, it was not a clear-cut issue of they tracked down and got the right person.
Yeah.
But then again, I am not familiar with other countries' justice systems. Uh-huh. So, but there was nothing that said this is what made it clear it was this one guy.
Yeah, when there
as
were
opposed to the other 2.
Huh.
Yeah, so anyway, while I was researching that.
But if she didn't have time for consensual sex with 3 men, then all 3 would have then been rapists, if that's how they were looking at it. I guess that.
No, I think it was just the one that she didn't have time to.
Oh, she had time for 2.
Yes.
But she didn't have time for 3.
Because I think one of them was her boyfriend.
Okay.
I don't know. Right? That's why I went, I can't, there's no way.
1, 2, that's fine. But 3, that is simply too many. Nobody has time for that. Although I do agree, nobody has time for that.
Ain't nobody got time for that. So, we're going to talk about Jefferson County, Illinois.
Here we go.
Because at the end of one of the articles, because I did look at some different articles.
That Jeffco or is that something else?
I think that's here.
Oh, yeah.
It's probably everywhere because there is a Jefferson County in New York. There's one in California.
It's like a Lincoln and
yeah. So I have to wonder if Jefferson County, Illinois, if it's just cursed. Because just some shit. So Jefferson County is in the southern part of the state. So it's much closer to, say, St. Louis. I mean, it's not close to St. Louis, but it's much closer to St. Louis than it is to, say, Chicago. So I came across, and I'm going to come back to it, an unsolved murder. But the story made reference to one of the victims had commented that there had been 15 murders over 2 years. This was in the mid-1980s in a county that now has a population of barely over 37,000. So that's not a very big place. And that's a lot of murder. So I'm like, what the fuck's going on in Jefferson County? I wanted to know what some of these other murders were. So I went way back because when you type in Jefferson County crime, you get a lot of interesting stuff. So back in 1924, this one is just, okay. It's in Ina, Illinois. This caught national attention because on July 16th, Jack Sweeten and his wife Elsie went for a drive, and they stopped at like a soda fountain and had ice cream and a Coke and bought some candy and some peanuts, got back in the car and drove home. So they both reported not feeling well when they got home. But Jack got rapidly worse, and Elsie started calling doctors. She called 4 doctors, including one who, I can't remember the term they use, but it'd be the equivalent of your primary care physician,
okay.
Their family doctor. And one was the doctor at the mine where Jack worked. So because Elsie also did not feel well, they decided, and they had stopped and eaten, they decided that Jack had ptomaine poisoning. Now, do you remember hearing about ptomaine poisoning?
Vaguely, yeah.
It's just an old term for food poisoning. Bacterial food poisoning. I mean, I can remember my mom talking, you're going to get ptomaine poisoning if you don't wash your hands. I haven't thought of ptomaine poisoning in years until I read this. Whatever it was Jack had went from bad to worse. He kept vomiting. He was in enough pain that they gave him morphine shots. Less than 2 weeks later, he was dead. He was only 41 years old, and he left Elsie with 3 small children. So those 4 physicians that she called, they did an autopsy. They did like a group autopsy and said his liver was enlarged. So he obviously died of cirrhosis. Mm-hmm. Although there was no mention of him being any kind of drinker. The body was not embalmed, and the funeral was performed the next day by Reverend Height, who revealed that Jack had accepted Jesus on his deathbed. Because Reverend Height had been there to comfort, they were parishioners. He was there with him, comforting him on his deathbed and his final struggles. So he was also helping Elsie after Jack died, in part by feeling her up where the neighbors could see. So Elsie took care of her kids, she found a job, and she volunteered at the church a lot. So in early September, now remember, he got sick in the middle of July. So in early September, there was a church camp retreat that they all went on. And when they came back, the Reverend Height, came home and made dinner for his wife and kids, and they all developed indigestion. So once again, ptomaine poisoning was blamed, and in 6 days, Anna Height, his wife, was dead. So the people who lived in Ina were like, no fucking way. They just were like, nuh-uh. So they weren't very good. The Reverend and Elsie weren't very good at keeping what was going on a secret. So with 2 spouses dead in such a short time, people were suspicious and the police listened. So the coroner investigated, and it turned out that poor Anna was poisoned with arsenic.
Oh, what a surprise.
What a shocker. The Reverend tried to say that he bought rat poison 3 separate times because the rats were so bad. No shit. He said the rats were so bad they were carrying off chickens. I was like, dude, that's a chupacabra,
That's right.
not a rat.
Right.
I mean, have you ever seen a chicken, Reverend?
Are you aware of what size they are compared to a rat?
I mean, now would a rat haul off a dead chicken? I'm sure, but these were like, the rats were carrying away live. Anyway, next they exhumed Jack Sweeten, and shock, he also died of arsenic poisoning. So the 2 lovers, I'm not kidding you, I couldn't even record how many times they changed their story. They would confess and recant and then tell it differently and then tell it again and then take it back. It was just on and on and on. They were tried together and found guilty. So Height got life in prison and Elsie got 35 years. But when she won an appeal for a new trial a few years later, she was acquitted, despite having confessed at least 3 times.
I still think it was just really hard for them to convict women before a certain time. Because they were like, no way could this frail creature actually murder someone.
Well, and people who were there said, well, no, we all thought she was guilty.
Yeah.
But then why was she acquitted? I don't get it. So, but wait, here's an interesting little sidebar. This is where the rabbit holes go. Elsie's lawyer couldn't represent her at the retrial because he was very busy defending Charlie Berger, a notorious bootlegger and gang leader in Southern Illinois, whose redeeming quality was, and he did have one, he fought against the KKK.
Oh.
Because did you know the Ku Klux Klan supported prohibition? Drinking was seen as un-American. It was something the dirty immigrants did.
Yeah.
So at one point, there was a big showdown between Berger's gang and the KKK in April of 1926. And although the police were called several times, somehow they didn't get around to responding. Mm. The dead Klansmen were officially ruled homicides by parties unknown. So while the Klan was wide-reaching and had a lot of power, especially in this part of the country, and even in things like the police departments and local politicians, not everyone who served the public was a dick.
That's good.
I find there's hope in that. I don't know that I'd especially call them good guys, but they basically let a gang lord do the dirty work for them.
Oh, yeah.
So I'm like, yeah, so... Okay, so back to... and this was not in Jefferson County, but it was the next county over. It was right next door. Okay, on January 25th, 1982, James Dare and his wife Margaret went to bed at 10 p.m. I get that sometimes. So remember, we're back in 1982. James woke up sometime later when his wife shouted, "Come quick." He ran to the living room where a man was standing with his arms around Margaret. He reportedly said, "If you interfere, I'll kill her." James Dare cannot remember anything else. The next morning, a neighbor came over, looked in the window, saw blood everywhere, and called 911. So the police and paramedics arrived shortly after 9 a.m. James was in deep shock and unable to respond to either verbal or physical stimuli.
Okay.
And some of the EMTs were attending just to him. The room showed signs of a struggle, and police determined a stereo and a portable TV had been taken. Now here's something. A large wooden-handled knife was found in a wash pan in the kitchen, and it was later determined to have been stolen in a burglary 2 days earlier. Okay. And this is just where I just went, what the ever-loving shit is going on here? So the man eventually charged and convicted with the robbery and murder was a black man. A confidential informant had told police that the man had stolen property in his car from the January 23rd robbery, the one that had been 2 days earlier. So he did. The police searched his car, found it. There was nothing else that put him at both scenes.
Right.
In addition, okay, so he's taken in and charged with murder on the basis of that knife being there. Circumstantial evidence. Thank you. I knew there was a word for that. I'm like, during jury deliberation. So this trial goes to court. In the jury room, one of the jurors circulated. It was called a scurrilous racist note.
I like the word scurrilous.
Yeah, and it's not in the record because they made a point of this is tasteless and disgusting and we're not going to reproduce it. Mm. And it was an all-white jury. And a janitor found it and went to the judge and said, this is in the jury. I mean, it was like, it wasn't like it had fallen out of a filing cabinet. It was something that obviously the jurors had had. They convicted him anyway and sentenced him to death. Mm. So in February of 1985, the Illinois Supreme Court threw out the conviction and said a mistrial should have been declared at the original trial when the racist joke had been discovered.
Oh, good.
By the way, Mr. Dare has never been able to recall or talk about a single thing that happened that night.
Uh-huh.
While his first comment... yeah.
Okay.
You're thinking what I'm thinking. Yeah. While his first comment indicated that a man had broken in, It wasn't until later that he amended that to say it was a black man. So
it's just so easy. It's just so easy to say, well, this black person attacked me and get some person convicted of it.
Just broke into my house and stabbed my wife to death to steal a portable television.
I don't think so.
No, I don't either. So.
But I'm impressed the Supreme Court at the time in the area, in that state.
Yes.
That was so
it took them a little while, but,
right?
Yes.
But that they overturned it. That actually did surprise me.
Yes. We've come up to the original case that caught my eye. In 1986, Keith and Elaine Dardine, along with their young son Peter, oh fuck, I gotta give a trigger warning because this is fucking awful.
Okay.
Sorry. They moved to Ina, Illinois, where the preacher and his paramour had poisoned their spouses. That same fucking town. They moved to Ina, Illinois, into a trailer just outside of town. They both had jobs in town. Keith worked at the water treatment plant, and Elaine worked at an office supply store. They both attended the local Baptist church. Keith sang. Elaine played the piano. In 1987, Elaine was pregnant with their second child. But on November 18th, 1987, Keith did not show up for work, hadn't called off, so his coworkers couldn't reach him on the phone. So his boss calls the police. The police go to visit the trailer that evening and discover that Elaine and her son Peter were beaten to death with a baseball bat. A baseball bat that Peter had received as a birthday present. Oh. And Elaine had been bound and gagged with duct tape. She had been beaten so badly it caused her to go into labor, and then the same fate befell the baby.
Yeah.
So because Keith was nowhere in sight, the police immediately thought he was guilty, but the very next day, his mutilated body was found in a nearby field. He had been shot 3 times, and his penis had been severed.
Oh, that's very personal.
Right? It is. And there's so much fury to beat someone to death with a baseball bat. So, his car was found 11 miles away in Benton, parked outside the police station, the interior spattered with blood. Now, to me, that's got to be significant of something that it was parked outside the police station.
Huh.
So, despite wild rumors and local hysteria, that's a summary right there, there were no answers as to who would commit this heinous crime. No drugs or alcohol found in any of the bodies, although the coroners were able to determine that they all died within about an hour of each other. Mm-hmm. 2 men were separately detained but were cleared and released. Because of the worldwide satanic panic, people suspected cult involvement. But there was no evidence for that.
No.
Police couldn't even say if more than one person had been involved. Although whoever committed the atrocity at the trailer seemed to have been comfortable enough to take their time and clean up after themselves, because it wasn't until after she was dead that Elaine's body was put into the bed with her children. Mm-hmm. There was no robbery because there was money and jewelry in the house. I mean, not a lot, but there was no sexual assault. The FBI was called in, but they said the crime defied their usual analytical methods.
Okay. Thanks for your help.
Yeah, thank you very much. So one of the ironies is that Keith's mother had visited the family the weekend before, and Keith kept talking about how he wanted to move out of the area as soon as possible. There had been 15 homicides in the rural county in the previous 2 years. In July of 1987, which is just a couple of months before this happened, a local 10-year-old girl had left home to look for her brother who was searching for the family dog, and her family never saw her alive again. The next morning, an oil field worker found her nude body face down in the dirt, footprints on her back, blood pooled around her head. She had been brutalized and her throat had been slit. The case went cold, but eventually Cecil Sutherland was apprehended and charged. When found guilty, he skipped the sentencing phase and just asked for the death penalty.
All right.
Okay, so this spree of murders in the not well-populated county were generally considered I haven't even gotten to all of them. This is such a rabbit hole. Had been kicked off in November of 1985, and I don't know who might have heard of this one. 18-year-old Tom Odell murdered his parents and 3 siblings as they returned home.
Oh, okay.
Fueled by LSD and rage, he stabbed his father to death with a butcher knife, then killed his mother by stabbing her in the neck. Y'all can't see this, but I'm doing hand gestures. He then killed his sister and 2 brothers when they came home, strangling one and stabbing the others. He was apprehended the next day and immediately confessed to the crimes, was convicted and sentenced to death. Court documents show a systematic pattern of abuse by his mother, which his father knew about but did nothing to prevent. Illinois later commuted all death sentences to life imprisonment, so Odell, O-D-L-E, is in prison to this day. There's a book about his case because when the sentence was commuted to life, he wrote to a psychiatrist that he had seen and said, "Is there any way I can understand what made me do this?" And so they had some sessions, and I think it was all by mail. Mm-hmm. And the 2 of them, he did not get a cent from the book, but the 2 of them put out a book, and it's considered, one more weapon in the arsenal of what makes a serial killer. So he did at least contribute something.
Good.
So back to the Dardines. There essentially were no leads. The police kept up the search, kept reviewing the case. No results. Then in 2000, something happened. And I've written a note. Shannon probably already knows, and so does Thing 2. Serial killer Tommy Lynn Sells was arrested for the murder of a 13-year-old and 10-year-old girl near Del Rio, Texas. So after his arrest, Tommy couldn't stop confessing. To abbreviate, he is pretty much absolutely linked to 22 murders, but officials believe he may be connected to very many more. The Dardines, however, are probably not related to Sells. He confessed. He said he did it. Mm-hmm. But when they pressed him on the detail, okay, tell us how you did it. Tell us where they were. The details did not match up. Some did, but the details that did match up were in the media.
Yeah.
So the brutal murder of the Dardine family remains open and unresolved to this day. And you know what? This whole thing started because I wanted to know about the murderer who was stuffing bodies in barrels. Damn it. I still don't know. I still don't know who was stuffing bodies in barrels. Although I suspect people have been doing that since the invention of barrels. There are so many.
Tommy Lynn Sells is one of those people that every once in a while you do a crime, right? And they're like, they thought it might be Tommy Lynn Sells. He's one of those major ones that comes up in that all the time.
Because apparently if they go in and say, hey, were you ever in Illinois? Yes, and I killed several people there.
Yeah.
Well,
I traveled through there.
Yeah. He just wants the attention.
But it's interesting how many of them have confessed to crimes where it doesn't match. This is exactly why information is held back, right?
Yes.
So that when somebody says, oh yeah, I did it. I killed her with a candlestick. It can be, no, sir. It was a rope. In the conservatory.
That's right.
You know wrong.
It was not in the hidden passageway. So I looked at genealogytrails.com, the Supreme Court of Illinois decisions in Illinois case law, The Nation, Los Angeles Times, Wikipedia, Murderpedia, lessons to be learned from Tom Odell's brutal homicide story, and Britannica.
Yeah.
It just kept popping up. It was like popcorn kernels in a pan.
I was obsessed with encyclopedias when I was young. I feel like a lot of Gen Xers were obsessed with encyclopedia, just loved an encyclopedia. And I remember they were doing the door-to-door sales and stuff like that.
Yep.
Man, I wanted the set of Britannica so
But you know what? I have to think that because new information is discovered on fucking every topic in the world, pretty much as soon as they're printed, something in them is obsolete.
Probably.
But you know what? I wish I still had the set we had in my house growing up. That'd be awesome.
And I was just thinking, you'd probably find it at an estate sale every little once in a while. Somebody had the whole Britannica, because I feel like that was a major investment.
I don't think ours were Britannicas, though. Was it an
I would have been happy
encyclopedia
with
set?
any set of
Yes.
encyclopedias, but yeah, I just remember those because there were ads for it, there were commercials, there were
Yes.
door-to-door salespeople, and I was always like, Mom,
I don't.
we need these.
Do they still do that?
The what? The door-to-door?
Yeah.
I don't think so.
They were still doing it when Friends was on because there's an episode where Joey buys one volume.
Right. There we go. It's time to go. All right.
We need a little farewell song to sing at the end.
Oh boy, no. That's not gonna happen.
Just the, oh boy.
No. I just so you guys know, we now have tiers. And I didn't
fears?
write down the stuff for fears. I will send you some fear. I just at buymeacoffee.com, so you can either do one-time donations, which is the buy me a book, or there's tiers with little special rewards that you can check out on buymeacoffee.com/MM Mayhem. So check it out. As low as $1 a month.
And we will be back next week.
Bye.
Bye. Thank you for listening to Mysteries, Monsters, and Mayhem.
Find us on Facebook and Instagram or at our website, mysteriesmonstersmayhem.com.
Please like, rate, and review, follow, and share wherever your favorite podcasts are downloaded.
Thank you for listening and supporting our podcast. We'll be back next week with more shenanigans.